Hey everybody, welcome back. This is instructor Phil Demetriadis, and we have a special visitor today, a fellow YouTube watcher all the way out from Haiti who happened to come all the way here to Fullerton, and she's going to give us a little shout out for her friends back home.
Salut tout le monde, c'est Tiffany. I'm here with Phil Demetriadis, and we're doing turtle sketching part 2.
Hey everybody, cool. That was awesome, right? And thank you, Tiffany, for doing our little voice intro there. So anyway, welcome back, guys. I have some sketching here, some more turtle faces for you that I've been working on, and actually finished this about a week and a half ago. And I've been so busy between classes, a little bit of freelance, and some other stuff that I was dying to get this out. So it's really cool that we get to have students that come here all the way from different countries from all over the world. So far to this day, this was Tiffany that opened up for us. She's here all the way from Haiti. I've had a couple students that have come all the way from Iran, and some students from just all over. So pretty cool, right? I love that. So coming all the way out to Fullerton, California, just to take classes, build their art and their abilities, and focus on what they're doing. So anyway, back to Turtle Land. So here's something that I've been working on, and just a bunch of variations of characters. And I've been trying to sort of go through and get warmed up and find my happiness spot for sketching. So one of the things that happens for me when I'm working with character design is I start to figure out the shapes, and I'm going to say not just the external shapes, but the interior shapes of what makes particular characters work. So for example, I actually have already transitioned and been working on birds as well for the past week, so I'll have some more demos coming up on that. But for example, on turtles, what's really important to me is the head ball that comes into the lower jaw, the upper jaw, how there tends to be that sort of like a little point, how the head ball goes down into the neck, how the neck then attaches to the center of the body. So those right there are definitely really key points that need to be addressed. And so what I like to do in the back of my mind is think about that lower jaw, the upper jaw, the neck, especially this part right here where we have the little like nose holes on the side, and there tends to be some turtles actually have a little bit of a front decoration element. And I should have shown you my reference, but I didn't because I just was sitting down sketching. But of course, I have multiple pages of reference from other artists, and also from just people's stock photography of going to zoos and whatnot, and just rendering out, taking photo. Can't talk while I'm looking at the screen, while taking their own photo reference of like family adventures and so on. So it's pretty cool because what I'll do is I'll type in on Google like our trip to LA Zoo or San Diego Zoo, or I'll type in family trip to the zoo, and all of a sudden I find all these people's blog sites that have tons of photos of different turtles from all around. So this really aids me because you know what, you are somewhat limited when you have Google. And I'll use Bing, even though I haven't really liked Bing lately. They've sort of changed their search features. But, Google and Pinterest, and the fact that I can go on there and I could just type in turtles. And then, I'm gathering reference, but I really haven't thought about the differences between lots of different types of turtles. And, what is the difference between a turtle and tortoise, desert tortoise, sea turtles, sea tortoise. Even I was looking around and I discovered that there were some turtles that live primarily in sand. In some countries, and then they go out just in the water for a temporary, and then they come right back. So I mean, there's so many different variants of creatures, you're not going to be able to gather all that reference. So I find it to be important just to go out and, like I said, I pull up my reference in front of me, and then I look at it, and then I sort of tuck it away, and I use that as a guide that helps me create my characters. And what's funny is that even looking at real life reference, man, you get like stubborn turtles or angry turtles or bitter turtles. So I mean, it's funny because you actually see real life characters coming out of the your reference. So, like I was telling one of my students the other day, when it comes to drawing and designing, it doesn't matter if you're working with characters, it doesn't matter if you're doing environments, it doesn't matter if you're doing staging for storyboarding or digital painting. The old expression continues. I should just put on side a shirt, which is you're only as good as your reference. It's really true. So the more time you sit and spend and come up with basics that uh, allow you to look at in terms of reference for subject matter, for head size, scale structure, textures, visual shapes, differences in turtles from around the country. I mean, all those things come together. And without that stuff, you're as good as your first drawing, which is, in my opinion, dead in the water. And that probably, outside of being an instructor, even when I was in animation working in the industry full time, a lot of times I was at companies where they would come to me and they would introduce me to an intern, and then it was my job while working full time to sort of prep that intern for a production. And I've actually had to do that on numerous occasions. So in some weird way, maybe that sort of what got me a little bit more into teaching is that having to work with these interns, develop them, and some of the interns would fade away and some would do really good. And it also depended where you're at, because if I was at a what we call a local 839 animation studio, our interns weren't allowed to draw because that's the way the union works. But sometimes when I was at non-union studios, we would get interns right out of college. And so, especially I remember being a big idea, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Joe Spataford, who's now done really well. He's an art director and works for a couple different companies. But Joe, he wasn't really an intern, but he was an entry-level employee who was very green and sort of came to us with like limited drawing experience. So anyway, just remember that you're only as good as your reference. And, just being around students, watching them dive into their projects, the first thing they do is they show up with like just limited reference on their subject matter, especially outside of character design. Character design might be a little bit easier. When you're dealing with environments, I really do think it's a little bit more complex, which is how I was trained in the background I came from before I got into characters. And part of the reason for that is that you had reference on the environment itself. For example, let's take Mayan architecture. You have to understand what part of the Amazon looks like, and where you would find that architecture. What does the jungle look like? What type of trees? And then at the same time, you also have architecture that was inspired by some of the the previous civilizations, and then their own art that they created as well, which also has a design premise in itself. So you're actually dealing with 3 or 4 different subject matters for reference for environments versus characters. I find it to be a little bit more easy and appealing. So anyway, I love doing this stuff. I've been drawing a lot digitally, and I sort of took a little bit of a break for about a week and a half, because I've switched a little bit over to working in my sketchbook, going from a pencil. So I tend not to focus in one subject matter too much. I mean one medium. There's something about digital that I really like, but then I gotta feel that natural drag of like a coal erase pencil or a colored pencil on a traditional sketchbook, because there's just a great feel that's coming out of that work. And I really enjoy that. I really find that's a good transition for me between the digital world and the traditional world. So speaking of that, brings me to a good conversation as I'm sketching a couple more characters here. Okay. What is that transition? Because I've noticed, talking to a couple of instructors and students, even with artists in general, the digital world has become a pretty dominant digital world with anything in the professional spectrum, right? You go into a studio now, none of the studios are using paper. Everyone's using digital devices, okay? However, though, for you as students, there is an extreme importance that's just monumental and totally valuable, that you really learn and come up with the adaptability of traditional drawing techniques and medium, and understanding that media and how it works in different formats. And I'm a really, really firm believer. By the way, I don't like this character I was just showing you here. There's equal proportions from the top to the bottom, so I think I'm going to go back in and readjust that. So, hey, I'm human. I hit bad drawings too that get me frustrated, but that's okay. So anyway, so I was having this conversation with a student, because I had a student who just carries around an iPad and sketches in it all day. And I told him, I said, hey, there's certain things you can't do digitally. And there's certain feels you're not going to be able to get digitally. I use digital all the time, but remember, I was trained as a traditional illustrator. I came from that background, and I'm proud of that background, because without that background, I don't think I would have the same sketch and sketchability feelings that I have now. And I still spend a tremendous amount of time in my traditional sketchbook, which I will apologize, I haven't been putting my stuff up on Instagram. I have started to, and I have tons of pages to put up on Instagram. I'm also doing some more demos of me using traditional media sketch and markers that I'll be posting up on this site as well. So, but the digital is cool, but here's my thought with that, right? Is I can teach somebody how to use digital in 6 months. I mean, you can become pretty efficient at Sketchbook Pro, Photoshop, in about a 6-month area with the right instruction and getting into the software. Not fully proficient at a professional level, but enough. It takes more time than that. However, I can't teach you how to draw in 6 months. I can give you the basics and get you form and structure, but it takes there's more longevity there. And one of the things I noticed was, when I go out, I see people drawing on their iPads, which is cool, but you're dealing with light conditions. You're dealing with ambient light, like in a coffee house, lack of light. One of the things I noticed there's a Starbucks by me that I go draw at. And whenever I'm at that Starbucks, they have these like spotlights, and it creates a real drastic shadow on like everything I'm doing. So, again, it works from one point of view. Then there's another point of view where I tell people you got to go back in and you have to just adjust a little bit. You got to learn those traditional techniques, extremely important. Just because of that, I wrote a class here at Fullerton College. We have a series of classes called Sketching for Animators and Illustrators, and we actually have specific classes. One of the classes deals with drawing in traditional media techniques, which are medium techniques that I learned from working in animation for 16, 17 years, and I learned from designers like Paul Felix, Michael Spooner, Jim Schlenker was another guy, Phil Mendez, and a lot of these artists are really talented. Roy Wilson, Robert St. Pierre, they worked in these good old-fashioned techniques. So in some weird way, I got to inherit some of those techniques from them because they come up through the 70s and the 80s. I was getting into animation then in the 90s up through the 2000s, and then I sort of went from that traditional background where we were sketching and then was able to come up through into a digital phase where now digital's completely taken over, which isn't bad. It's just production costs. That's all it is. Anyway, I'm lightening this character because I like what I have, but I thought about tweaking him a little bit more. I feel like I can maybe push the jawline and maybe a couple of the shapes and just see what else I come up with. So I do that sometimes, which is an old technique that I used to do with color erase blue pencil on animation papers. I would draw really rough, really loose. And then I would come back on top of those roughs and draw again. That's one of the things I miss about traditional. But here I can still do it in digital. I just have to remember to do it. A lot of times I try focusing on just getting a drawing out and done and spending about, a minute to a couple minutes on it, like what most of these sketches are. These are my exploration at a character, coming up with something, as quick as I can, right? Anyway, so that's why I lowered the paper opacity down really quick. Is I'm just trying to think about how can I make them look a little bit more menacing. Maybe I can squash and stretch, change a couple eyes so you can see the difference right there, right? I mean, to me, that's important because I like the second sketch a little bit better in terms of the linear line usage and the shapes that are in the character. Okay, adding some more detail. There. So you can see the difference where he had that curve in his head. This guy doesn't have as much as a curve. It's more of a straight line that drops down and makes him look a little bit more menacing. And then I added a little bit more detail there. So I felt this character was going into a menacing sort of snapping turtle feel. And I wanted to go back into that and address that by angling those edges and getting rid of any of those sort of round friendly curves that are in there, right? I mean, I really think you have to do that. That's an important part of understanding your design and figuring out how to embellish on an original sketch. Sorry, I'm snacking a little bit while I'm doing this demo. If you guys don't mind. If I don't have any food, my brain doesn't operate. So these are first passes, right, on characters, but you already saw the other demo I did on turtles, right? But there's still a phase after this, which I was communicating to my class, which is about embellishment. It's taking these studies I'm doing now and going back into them and, getting some more energy and getting in there and like pushing the characters, squashing the shapes out, seeing how you change them a little bit and what they turn into. I mean, to me, that's really, really important, is that anytime you do a drawing, you have to realize that's your first drawing, and your goal is to embellish and add more detail and information to those characters and make them more workable, if that makes sense, So, because I had a student tell me like a lot of the drawings that I do suck and they're not as great in my first page. And I'm like, that's okay. It's like doing thumbnails. You do a first page of thumbnails, all you need your goal is to just hoping that you get one or two that are good, that are stepping stones. And a lot of times I do bad drawings and sketch something because maybe I can't get the subject matter, I can't nail down part of the shapes, the interior shapes or exterior shape language that's there. So I have a drawing that comes out not the way I wanted, but that's my stepping stone to the better drawing. So I forgot who it was, but I remember Phil Mendez once, who studied, he was my director I worked with, super nice guy, super talented. He was trained, he got to study under a couple of the 9 old men at Disney when he was younger. And one of the things I remember he told me is they would come in there in the morning, sit down early, and they would spend almost like an hour and a half, and they would just sketch rough shapes and all kinds of things. And when he asked them, like, what are you guys doing? That was their warm-up. And they were doing those warm-ups to get out their bad drawings. So again, I was sort of telling that student, making that comment that, hey, you're going to do bad drawings. The secret to being a good artist is understanding that, not criticizing yourself, not knocking yourself down, and use those drawings as a stepping stone to graduate yourself to a better drawing level. I mean, that's my take on it. And I think that has a lot to do with being positive about the subject matter and not negating yourself with a negative of, oh man, I suck and my drawings are horrible, I'm not that good. Well, everyone does bad drawings. That's part of the process. You have to get in there and just keep drawing and working on things, looking at your mistakes, and then realizing how are you going to make it better and how are you going to make it stronger. That is what is important. That is what is key and part of your growth, okay? Which, speaking of, I have another video series that I'm going to be bringing out. It's going to probably be in about 2 parts or 3 parts. It's just taking a lot of time mapping out the flow of it. But it's going to have to deal with artistic temperaments and belief systems of artists. Like, how do you become a better artist? And there is a certain pathway to follow that leads you down the right path to the bright white light of drawing that is what I would call like the correct path, and not the Sith path, not the path of destruction and not the path of low self-esteem and confidence, but a path that you need to be aware of takes time and effort and maintenance. Okay? All right. So let me move. I wanted to move this guy over a little bit here. Give me a second. All right. Better save. All right. I like that guy. He's like my Milt Kahl inspired turtle. Milt Kahl did that. He had a lot of those angular planes with the shapes. And when I was a kid, I used to sketch his stuff all the time. It taught me a lot about understanding shapes and looking at part of those mechanisms, seeing how they fit together. So on this guy, I'm really interested in the roundness, because the other character had angles, and there are lots of angles. And I do that sometimes where I try to switch up what I'm thinking about or drawing So if I go with angles, then I try to switch. Oops, sorry here. Come on, close this. So if I'm going with angles and I switch back up and go in the other direction with circles, see what happens. That to me is the wonderful world of opposites, which is a compositional term. Not only does it deal with composition itself and narrative storytelling, it also heavily applies itself into character design and gives you some of the base fundamentals of considering and thinking about different approaches to your design process. Sort of like that idea of he's got this frazzled hair, and he's got these teeth sort of popping up, which I probably shouldn't say this, but okay, there's this one guy that I see when I go to my local Costco, and it looks like he did a lot of drugs because he has teeth that are like falling apart and coming loose, or he has some type of teeth disease, and his hair is sort of frangled out. So I'm thinking of that guy when I'm drawing my little turtle here because his hair looks sort of like this. And every time I see him, he's very nice and polite, but it's like, it's like talking to someone who's got a zit like right on their lip or their nose. You're just like looking at him, and his teeth are so mangled, they're like falling apart. So every time I see him, you see like the teeth cut apart and the brown inside to it. It's sort of nasty, right? So this is I'm thinking of that guy as I'm drawing this. So again, a lot of times for a lot of designers and a lot of character artists, thinking of your world and the things that exist around your world, is what I meant to say, and the things you experience every day, going for a walk, the people you see, and so on. Those are a lot of the characters and the individuals add a lot to the traits that you do. That's why you got to sort of get out there a little bit, right, and go look at some cool, look at people in real life. Another great place to go, which I wish they had an area to sit and draw, but I have a local thrift store by me, the Salvation Army, and I've been in there before and seen some great characters like in there. I mean, there's a certain type of person or character that goes into a thrift store and buys sometimes you can get really cool stuff like old beat up furniture or some old electronic stuff that they don't make, which is really cool. But, I saw this lady in there like buying this suit, and man, she had this big hat on and she's buying a couple of suits to wear. And I'm like, man, she just totally looks like an animated character right now. Like you wouldn't see something like that. So, I think getting out there and observing people, which you guys know where I'm going with this, right? This is part of the sketchbook phase, right? So you can't get out there and look at people when you're stuck in a digital world. You have to be able to get out there, look at people going to Target, or as I say, Target, or you have to look at people going to a Walmart. You have to look at people going into a thrift store, Salvation Army, go to a place. I've noticed there's a lot of these places that have like an outdoor shopping center where there's like one round circle where there's a fountain and there's like coffee shops or cafes around it. So we have quite a bit of those out here in Southern California. So you can go to one of those and you sort of sit there with a cup of coffee and watch all these interesting people walking by, shopping, stopping. And those are the people you really want to look at. I mean, those are the people you're going to learn from. You're going to look at their expression, their shapes, their gestures, and it's going to give you a better idea on how you look at them and then you draw them and embellish them in your sketchbook or change features on them, right? That's going to make you better at what you do. Okay. So this guy was thinking, the guy just did was round shape with hard edge. So it's, opposites of shape against each other. This felt sort of cool, young, a little bit of attitude. So I really noticed with turtles, I'm either bringing the front jaw in tight or out, or bringing the lower jaw in or out. So to me, that's one of those key elements that's changing in part of the design, is really considering how the turtle, and it's funny, this almost looks like an old Greek guy at a coffee house, like playing matavali or backgammon, that's what we call it in Greek, playing backgammon, like drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. Sort of his lower jaw, but we can turn him into a turtle though. It's almost like he's an old, I don't know, part of me's not liking part of this design, but that's all right. Let's see where it goes, where it transitions to. You can have old grumpy turtles that don't have lower teeth, right? You know, lots of wrinkles. Absolutely you can. I had a student a couple weeks ago that made a comment and said, we're talking about an environment. And I said, well, change it up and add extra doors and do this. And they said, well, that's not how it is in the reference. I said, yeah, that's just the reference. Reference is a starting point for you. Your job, the one thing to me that's really cool about animation and entertainment in general is your job. You shouldn't call you a concept artist. You should be called an embellisher, you know, because that's really what your job is. Your job is to embellish upon reference, subject matter, architecture, and design, and come up with new and creative ideas and processes that add to, you know, an approach. I actually like this guy. Now that I look at him, I can just imagine him talking. He reminds me of, I have an old guy in my neighborhood who's like original owner. He's lived there from like the 70s. And he'll drive by sometimes. And once I was outside working and he stops by, rolls down his window, and he's like, he didn't have his dentures in, which were his false teeth, right? And he looks over and he says, what's going on here? What are you working on? And I'm like, so, you know, I was really cool about it. Some people would be like, excuse me, I'm in my freaking yard. I'm working on, you know, maybe adding some stone, or I'm working on my yard, you know. At that time I was redoing part of the front of my house, right? So he comes up with that huge comment, and it's like, that's what that guy sort of looked like. That's what he, you know, sort of reminds me of that older, you know, huge underjaw, freckled face because he's been out in the sun too much, sort of grumpy looking, you know. So anyway, sorry, I don't mean to talk too much, but you know, this is my energy level, and this is what I just try to share this with you guys, because this is what I'm thinking about when I'm working on stuff, you know. I told one of my students that you have to talk to yourself when you're working, ask yourself questions, so you understand where a drawing's going and if it's working or not going. Because if it's not working the way you want it to go, you have to stop, assess it, and make changes right away, right? And maybe you have a drawing that's working, but it's not exactly turning out how you would envision, like I mentioned earlier. That becomes your stepping stone now on how to make it better. So this guy was imagining a large upper ball shape, but his lower jaw like almost non-existent. The lower jaw almost blends directly into his neck. So when he's talking, his upper beak part of the turtle with the little point is sort of moving while his eyes are sort of staying still. Okay, or maybe it's moving in conjunction with his neck going sort of back and forth, and that's how he talks a little bit. So he just ends up having this large shape. I want to keep some detail up here in the front so it keeps your eyes focused on the character's eyes. I like that. So you have some nice round shape. You have some cool curves. Then I'm going to try to enhance that again with these little circles in there. Try to pop that out a little bit more, you know. Good thought of applying some textures or bring them out. Now, I know I should stop here. Stop texturing, because then it'll kill it, right? It'll lose its energy. Just try to get enough in there to where the character's starting to read, and then you leave it alone. All right, cool. Got a couple more to finish up here, and then we'll wrap this page up. When I started this guy, I was thinking a little bit about an eagle with like that pointed nose, almost like a cross between an eagle and a hawk. How do I get those hawk eyes or face. But I don't know. One of the problems I was mentioning that it's really easy to start sketching a turtle, and if you get a couple angled shapes in there, it starts to look more like a mix between like a Japanese like land dragon or Komodo dragon or some other type of lizardish creature. It's really easy to get them in. So I'm thinking maybe the jaw should protrude outward and he should look older. I don't know. This is sort of annoying me a little bit because I went from one shape pattern. Now I'm sort of going into another. Let me see if I can carry it off and get it to read. Yeah, so now I'm thinking, yeah, I like this a little bit better. I'm thinking the pointy nose, but maybe he has that because he's like one of those crustaceous turtles that eats plants all the time. And he's like reaching up and he's biting his mouth on different plants. So I want to keep some of those hard lines in there, but maybe he chews a lot because he's a, vegetarian based tortoise or turtle or whatever. And he's just sort of crunching through and grinding on leaves and branches. The thing I love about drawing, you never know where it's going to take you, right? You just sketch and have fun and do the best job that you can. Part of me could revisit him a little bit because there's a little bit to him that I sort of don't like. I feel like I could push his shapes a little bit more, but it's all right. Let me see if I can just tighten this part up a little bit. I want to change the... Yeah, I didn't like that lower with the back being round. It's getting a little confusing there. So let me see what else I come up with. Now I'm getting frustrated. I sort of like that wide beak though, like that. It's a little bit more expressive in the shape language. The other one was just too long and narrow. It just wasn't quite... I was going for that eagle thing, but it wasn't quite just matching up somehow. That's why, what's funny is that after doing these, there's a lot of round shapes based off of round head balls. I'm so ready to go out and just do. I was thinking the other morning about squashed faces, just completely dropped down and like super duper like squashed, like they'd been in a vice, and the turtle is just has this rah, 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 sort of growl because it's such a squashed out face. So I ended up changing this guy quite a bit. So this is a little frustrating because it wasn't quite coming out. Sometimes when you're sketching, you feel that sort of vibe in your sketch and you feel it makes sense and it starts to work together pretty well. But I don't know, there's something. Now he's much more on the evil side. He's sort of malicious turtle that talks with a little bit, almost thinking maybe a little bit like Scar and Lion King, He's got some cool angles and points in there. So sort of kept that beak mentality of the bird or the hawk, but squashed him down a little bit more. And I think now I need to go maybe in the opposite direction of that and see what I develop. Happy, fun turtle, right? Not squashed, angry beak turtle. Maybe he's eating. He's all innocent. What? I'm just eating. Okay, Ma. Be right there. Just snapping away. Yeah, I like him. I like how he's developing up a little bit. I like that large, nice rounded with a little bit of a straight line. Got a little bit of a tip point. So his jaw looks like he could rip through, but then he's got that rounded curve on the bottom. So again, some nice little opposites coming to work well on there. I think that's developing pretty cool. Yeah. I like him. Just punch up a little bit of the lines here. He's definitely another different pathway, friendly, fun. Oops, sorry. I just got a text from my wife that part of our city is on fire right now, and that the fire is getting close to a bunch of houses and next to the city of Corona and Yorba Linda. I was like, whoa, holy cannoli, all the hills are on fire. Crazy. All right, let me get another one in here. So just thinking younger, maybe round shape, a little bit different. Maybe he's younger. So I could go either two ways with this. He could be younger, where his teeth haven't come out yet and he sort of has those gums like wrapped around, or he could also come off as being a little older. And I think he's going more to the older, where maybe his teeth have sort of fallen apart and he's got this really sort of pronounced angled jaw that comes with like skin that wraps around him when he's just sort of rocked his teeth around it, and he has a little bit of that, that sort of, oh, I'm trying to get, I can't chew some of this because I'm just an old turtle, right? I don't know. But if I take off the wrinkles on the eyes, you could go a little bit more on the younger side too. So, these are the things you go through. And if I show the tongue a little bit, it'll make him younger. So I still could correct the eyes, but if you see that right there, just by adding a little bit of that tongue in there, that's something that you'll notice a lot when you're looking at kids, babies, their tongues are out. They're sort of like, with noises. And so if I open up his jaw a little bit, show a little bit of the tongue, have a tooth coming out, really starts to make him more on the younger side. Cool? Yeah. I'm getting there. Sorry, my voice is a little. Part of me wants to do more of a voice for this guy, but I notice my voice is starting to get a little stretched out, and that's from just teaching and lecturing. So sometimes when I'm at home, if I'm sketching or out at Starbucks, I try to do the voice to a character because it really helps me feel how that character is coming through, right? I mean, that's just a common sense thing. We want to make sure he's working and making sense. Okay. So let's see if I think I got some room up here to get a couple more in. So, thought I'd mention this. I'll mention it now. I love putting videos up on YouTube because I think it's really cool to share with everybody. I'm also considering, so talking to a friend of mine, and I might start a Kickstarter account because I want to start making some books for sale. And I thought about just having a book on just doing a bunch of books on daily sketching and just filling them up and then having them available with samples of sketches. And I thought about doing something a little bit more instructional. So just was thinking about it because I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. We're putting all my stuff up for free on YouTube and everyone gets to watch it and they learn from it. And then doing a Kickstarter account, maybe I can do something where like if somebody buys a book for like $20 or contributes 20 into it, I'll do an original sketch in the front of it with a Sharpie, and then I'll have a bunch of this work inside the book, which is work that I've been doing, just sketching for my classes here at Fullerton College, and then also doing demos for a lot of you guys, and just being, an artist in general and trying to share some of this knowledge and hopefully, inspire some of you to spend a little bit more time on your craft and your sketchbooks and get out there and draw, right? See what you can turn your skill sets into with a little bit of hard work and a little bit of dedication, So, I was just thinking angry for a minute, but I don't know. Getting a little frustrated with this guy. Maybe he's not a super positive individual. Trying to think about how to make him look a little bit more grumpy. That eyebrow wasn't quite hitting the way it should on the other side there. Yeah, so I think that'd be cool. I'm definitely, sorry, I'm like trying to sketch and do this and stopping for a minute. Yeah, I think the Kickstarter thing would be a lot of fun, you know. So I think what I'm gonna do is I might wait. I need to do a little bit more planning on the book itself, the amount of pages. So I thought it'd be cool just to put up like some really simple, like, you know, maybe 20-page books, soft cover type of thing, you know, and then maybe a little bit later do something that's a little bit more developed. So, okay. So sorry, I should stop talking about that. I'll figure that out in time. This guy's frustrating me. I'm getting angry. Part of me wants to delete him. I don't know if I love him or hate him. Part of me wants to expand off the shapes. Part of me is getting a little frustrated. He looks negative. Maybe that's why he looks more negative and not as upbeat and fun. I don't know. Maybe I'll just leave him a little bit. I'm still thinking about coming. I like that idea with that, like that jaw that barely opens, where he's sort of like, well, you guys know that, blah, 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 and he talks sort of negative. Now, it's sort of what I was going for here on that last one, but I feel like I could push those shapes a lot more. I could get some better designs out of it. And I don't think some of that was happening in that last sketch, but that's okay. Right? Got to be positive about it. I got something new that can act as a stepping stone that gets me to another part of my design here, right? You know that, was it Cary Grant that had, no, is it that old like gangster voice from like the 50s? It was like, yeah, I'm gonna get you, Bugsy Siegel type of, gonna get you, copper. Yeah, that's what I was imagining for the other turtle that I was doing here on the left, is maybe he's got that sort of grumpiness, you know. Yeah, no one tells me what to do. I live in this jungle by myself. I don't know, something like that. Maybe just something a little bit different to get him to work. I like this guy though, because he looks fun and he's got that pointy jaw. I really like that a lot. It's a lot more energy taking place on him, which is pretty neat. Working pretty cool. He's friendly, but a nice pointy shape on there as well. Anyway, I really like this guy that I'm doing right now because he feels young, but he's got that large beak. He looks like he could be like this crustaceous sort of, you know, African turtle that maybe like goes around and eats, you know, like roots or something. And he's got that pointy jaw because he digs his face into the ground, something like that. So, okay. It's still oinking me. That's my new word, is oink, by the way, and bugging me. I don't like my grumpy turtle, so I'm just going to erase him in a minute. I'm going to put something else there. But I like this guy, though, right? So, yeah, he's working. So I think I can get, you know, yeah, like that angled shape in there. Really cool, right? So, all right. So I think I can get two more in here. Let me move him over a little bit more. And I'm getting rid of old grumpy turtle. I didn't like his shapes at all. Not really working for me. So I like what I have down here so far. They're really cool. I have a lot to go off of here. So let's come up here and let's put another one in, and then I'm going to delete my Bugsy Siegel turtle that doesn't really look like Bugsy Siegel anymore. The more I look over at him, it's like having an ugly, you know, stepsister or aunt or somebody. You're like, you don't want to look at them too much because they're ugly and they're just annoying you, and I don't want that face on my page. So I think I'm going to get rid of them because I see another turtle coming out of that turtle, which I'm going to go over. I like the shapes there, but I just had an idea about rounding the head, keeping the lower jaw like that, so I'm going to change it in a minute as soon as I finish this guy. So let's get this guy in. Happy little young guy, let's say. Go for some smaller eyes. I notice small eyes, like really, really small, sometimes they make characters look very serious. I know on turtles, the small eyes make them look a little bit more like, it makes the head, oops, sorry, bumped something. Makes the head look a little bit more like a T-Rex, doesn't it? You see that in there? Or like a raptor? When you go for those small eyes, I think that's part of the shape language you've already been exposed to. I mean, look at that head. That head is easily could be turtle, but I think that's where you have that crossover between turtle and then raptor meets, dinosaur. I mean, it looks very, very similar. So it could still be turtle, but man, I could easily throw on that body of a T-Rex or raptor right here on this guy, and he would total, would absolutely work. Would make sense. Like that pattern on there. Put some a little bit more into the turtle neck of the woods. Maybe some stripes on them. And because I don't want them to look like a T-Rex or a raptor. Bring them more into turtle land. Put the top of where that shell would be. That's sort of cool. I like him. Yeah, I think he came out nice. All right, let's move him over a little bit. Get him in place. Yeah, just put him, leave him where he was, I guess. And let's delete. Hold on, let's move him down a little. I got a little bit more room here. Just center the page a little, right? So everything's not so super close. That's pretty cool. Almost done. I think we can get one more in here. Let's get rid of him. All right, Bugsy Siegel. Later, dude. Let's get him out. And I like what I have so far. I like this page. It's been a good drawing day. I'm happy with most of the designs here. Okay. All right. Positive power. Let the healing begin. Right? So thinking I like that lower jaw coming up, but maybe smaller head ball shape. So I want to keep the jaw I had before. Small head ball shape, a little bit more upbeat. Maybe sort of nostrils right in here. Get the eyes tucked in there. Yeah, he looks a lot more enjoyable. Maybe he's like peeking his head up through a bunch of like green shrubbery. And he's like, hey, everybody, I'm over here. And he's like eating on leaves. So we'll go back to Grumpy Turtle later. I like this guy a lot better right now. So I know I should have left him, but that's just like a pet peeve where I'm working on something. It's not going the way I want it. I want to change it. I want to adapt it. Just modify it just a little bit more. So, all right, so we're going to finish this guy up. Move him over a little bit more. See if I can get a little bit of a neck, maybe going towards the shell there. Helps me see part of the character, part of the design too. It's cool. Gotta love little teeth popping up there. Let me see. Put a little line or two on there. That's cool. I like him. He's fun. He'd be fun. He'd be, you know what? He's fun, but he'd be hard. If I were to draw him from a side view, I'd have to really figure out how that jaw connects with the back of the skull. It could be exaggerated, but it could also, imagining from a 3D point of view to model that character, could be a little bit of a struggle trying to get that blend in there and be able to get that the way the back of the skull connects to that lower jaw and see how it sort of comes together. You know, that's always a battle. All right. So here we are. This is my finished page. I put a little bit of light tone under there, just light, so it allows you to see the characters a little bit off the page, but separating from the white, but it also allows you to see just a teeny bit of the overall silhouette shape of the character to get that read to happen. So Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. And I need to take this image and I need to go post it. I always forget. I'm trying to get better. I'm on Instagram and I'm trying to post all of my sketches now on Instagram. So whenever I'm in my sketchbook, whenever I'm working on something, I'm trying to get that going. Also, I would heavily appreciate it, all of you guys out there in YouTube land, if you don't mind sharing some of these lectures like this with other artists or other people that you know. I would totally appreciate it because I'm trying to get my numbers up a little bit more on YouTube. Haven't really tried that before, but now I'm just really trying to spend like a good year or two at it, just doing more demos and getting them up there because, you know, I guess my overall plan is I want to really expand the YouTube site. I want to get into doing lectures and interviews with other artists, their working styles, and then of course me myself do a lot more detailed videos and demos into other areas. And then with the Instagram and all that going, hopefully that'll help me branch out a little bit. So thanks for watching, guys. Take care, have a good one, and keep on drawing. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.